Relax, trust in the Most High, He got your back. Praying fast when you under attack.
What are the different strands that come together to make hip-hop culture?
Well, one of the things that really attracted me to hip-hop in the beginning was how really fundamentally basic the foundations of hip-hop were. And by basic, I mean it's the basic foundations of what one learns in school in terms of education. It's the elements is what they call it. And so graffiti writing, which they refer to as writing, was one element. Another element was DJing and what is now producing is also called turntablism. Another one was lyricism, and that was the MC. And then there was dance, and dance was defined as to b-boy, b-girl, because the dancing occurred on the break beats, and so there were break dancers. And the other element that developed that was very much a part of hip-hop culture was what they called knowledge. And knowledge was this whole theory around how do you talk about what's really going on? How real can you be? And this constant push to deal with reality and representation of reality as part of what made you very much a part of hip-hop culture.
But knowledge presumably runs through the other
Yes.
major elements
Yes.
as well, right?
Yes,
So
exactly. Because hip-hop culture is a youth culture for the most part, there's a tremendous amount of critique, and so it has to be witnessed. And those who are witnessing it are contributing, they're collaborators as well in terms of what's happening. So you really do have to be able to represent with the knowledge that comes to all that. So you don't want to appear to be naive, inaccurate. So what happens in terms of hip-hop culture is that the artist, him or herself, has to really work to look at the history of their community, their school, their larger city, the world, whatever it is they're going to talk about, so that they actually not only represent these communities in an accurate way, but they do it in an amazingly creative way.
First, a lot of people thought it was going to be crazy. They said, "What's this type of music you're making? What's this hippity hoppity stuff?"
This is our sound. I just hope that they remember where it came from.
Yeah, the beginnings of rap go way back to the mid-'70s, when street gangs in the Bronx got tired of beating each other down and breaking heads and decided to channel that energy into something more creative. That began a battle for musical supremacy.
The birth of hip-hop was born in the Southeast Bronx.
1, 2, 3, 4, get it!
You can hear the music for blocks away. People be coming off the train stations. They be coming from buses. Others will come in cars, taxis, and mopeds. It was wild and exciting. When they heard the beat coming on and the crowd started screaming and girls started getting down, the brothers started getting wild, it was live and funky. It started out first about boosting about yourself, just call and response, getting the party jumping, talking a lot of nonsense. I'll get your MC to rock a crowd or get the party jumping.
We had territories. It was like Kool Herc had like the West Side. Bam had like Bronx River. DJ Breakout had like way uptown past Gun Hill. Myself, my area was like 138th Street, Cypress Avenue, up to Gun Hill. So it's like we all had our territories and we all had to respect each other. I didn't like the complete records that were out there. It was like it was always our best part of a great record. And that's what I actually concentrated on. You you know, going to the intro of that record and keep it going, going to the intro and keep it going.
We took the, you know, those small sections of the record and cut it back and forth and extended it to like maybe a 15-20 minute segment, and in turn the rappers would just rap over it. So that's where, you know, we got the term, you know, rapping over the, you know, over the various beats. It was like, you know, just like the natives playing on the drums, but we found our own drums to play with, and we call them turntables. And this is part 2, what we used to do, and it goes a little something like.
But I got, about 1994, I was disgusted with hip hop. Everything about hip hop. I got tired of shopping demos, trying to conform myself to be somebody that I wasn't after a while, just trying to make these demos to please these record companies and shit like that. I said, fuck it, I left it alone. So when Rakim came out, as I showed you, in '88, that was more or less the pineal gland of hip hop. He brought the wordplay and brought knowledge that you was God. Chuck D, I'm gonna associate with the throat chakra because of the voice. I'll give the native tongues in them cats. I'll give them the heart because they made you feel good, the whole native tongues. We began to move up. Once we got to the pineal gland, they came out with NWA.
So, the secret meeting that changed rap music and destroyed a generation.
Damn.
So it says, hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making my story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Damn.
Hold on, let me
So we gonna tell the story.
We gonna tell the story. We ain't scared.
You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do?
They after us, not just playing.
Look, that black van.
So look, so he says, between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came to Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then, since technology and media weren't accessible to people like that, like they are today. The industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted.
Right.
This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Rap music's new direction.
Yeah.
Little did I know we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices ever seen.
Crazy.
So this was the meeting. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people were being there.
Right.
Most of them familiar faces. Speaking of those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private meeting to discuss the future of hip-hop.
Talk to him.
Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued, in some cases, disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on matters and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination immediately. We asked several people what this meeting was about, and the reason for such secrecy, but could not find anyone who had the answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. Nobody stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me.
That's right.
A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected all the agreements from us. So now it's going to get to the good part because the meeting about to start.
Talk to him, G.
It says, quickly after the meeting began, hold on one second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol. No,
for real though.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable in the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates.
Mm-hmm.
The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons.
Mm-hmm.
It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "It's..." At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague, who opened up the meeting earlier, hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Damn.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do. And it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as we walked back into the house. I remember word for word the last thing he said. It's out of my hands now. Just remember you signed an agreement. He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our car and actually waited until we drove off the property.
Between 1970 1970 and 2005, the US's prison population grew by a massive 700%, far outpacing both population growth and crime rates. Today, it's got to the stage where America is home to 5% of the world's population, but a quarter of the world's prisoners. And not only does America have the highest imprisonment rates of any country in the entire world, but it also has the highest rate of youth incarceration. Over 130,000 juveniles are detained in the US every year, and on any given day, there are more than 70,000 youths in detention. But the biggest winners of this mass incarceration haven't been the American public, but the private prison companies who are making giant profits out of people being in jail. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, in 2010, the two largest prison companies alone received nearly $3 billion in revenue, while their top executives each received annual compensation packages worth more than $3 million. Private prisons didn't really exist before the early 1980s, when US states and the federal government needed a solution to the overcrowding in public prisons. But between 1990 and 2009, the number of people in private prisons increased by a massive 1,600%. And the business model of these private prison companies essentially depends on locking more and more people up. The biggest of the US's private prison companies is the Corrections Corporation of America, otherwise known as the CCA. In its 2010 annual report to shareholders, the CCA stated, "The demand for our facilities and services could be adversely affected by the relaxation of enforcement efforts, leniency in conviction or parole standards and sentencing practices, or through the decriminalization of certain activities that are currently proscribed by our criminal laws." The CCA seems to be particularly concerned about the decriminalization of drug use and any potential changes to immigration laws. For instance, any changes with respect to drugs and controlled substances or illegal immigration could affect the number of persons arrested, convicted, and sentenced, thereby potentially reducing demand for correctional facilities to house them. Because of these concerns, private prison companies spend a lot of money on lobbying politicians. According to analysis by the Associated Press, between 2002 and 2012, the CCA, along with the US's second and third largest private prison companies, Geo Group Inc. and Management and Training Corporation, otherwise known as MTC, spent around $45 million on lobbying state and federal governments between them. And in addition to lobbying, these three companies also pour hundreds of thousands of dollars every year into the election campaigns of governors, state legislators, and judges. And a report by the National Institute on Money in State Politics revealed that between 2003 and 2011, the CCA alone hired 199 lobbyists in 32 states, while GEO hired 72 lobbyists in 17 states.
Ever wonder why you see the same stereotypes of black and brown people depicted in hip-hop music? What if I told you that some of the biggest music companies are in cahoots with private prison owners, and that the rap music we listen to is not only meant to entertain, but to verbally and visually support criminal behaviors that funnel disenfranchised people into these private prisons? Lastly, what if I told you I have proof? In 2012, CoreCivic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America, the biggest name in the private prison industry, contacted 48 states offering to buy their prisons. One requirement of eligibility for the deal was particularly strange: an assurance by the agency partner that the agency has sufficient inmate population to maintain a minimum 90% occupancy rate over the term of the contract. Wait, what? What kind of legal and ethical measures could be taken to ensure the maintenance of a 90% prison occupancy rate? Now let's work together to connect these things, because I'm sure you're a smart person. It won't be long. Let's do the work. In 2012, a mere 232 media executives were responsible for the intake of 277 million Americans, controlling all avenues necessary to manufacture any celebrity and spark any trend. Time Warner, as the owner of Warner Brothers Records, can not only sign an artist, But since they're also owners of Entertainment Weekly, they can also put an artist on the cover by next week. You think you choose what you listen to, but do you? Both BET and MTV belong to Viacom. Okay, now I know that's not news to some, but when the use of these media conglomerates is cross-checked with ownership of the biggest names in prison privatization, it's starting to get a little fishy. The largest holder in CoreCivic, formerly Corrections Corp of America, is Vanguard Group Incorporated. Vanguard is the #1 largest holder in both Viacom and Time Warner. Vanguard is also the largest holder in the GEO Group, the second largest owner of private prisons in the US. The overlap in private prison / mass media ownership is disturbing. Let's make this clear. The people who own the media are the same people who own private prisons, the exact same people. They make money from getting so-and-so from the hood to glorify the life they live, and they don't care about the impact it has on others because money is the motive. Then when the music influences others in criminal behavior, they make money from all the impressionable low-income people of color that are expected to go inside their private prisons. You can research these companies yourself, by the way, it's not hidden.
Hip-hop is undeniably the most pervasive and influential genre in North America and many parts of the world today. Its content and style have unquestionably transformed since the pioneering days of the Sugar Hill Gang, Curtis Blow, and Run DMC. Many would agree that the genre experienced much progression following the old school days of the 1980s. Rappers during the 90s, including Tupac, the Notorious B.I.G., Outkast, Nas, and Jay-Z, explored lyricism, storytelling, and musicality in unprecedented fashion. In the 2000s, Eminem, 50 Cent, Lil Wayne, and Kanye West were among some of the most notable hip-hop acts that helped remodel the meaning of rap music. The 2010s introduced household names such as Drake, Nicki Minaj, J. Cole, and Kendrick Lamar, who have all contributed to pushing the limits and threshold of what a rapper could be. In recent years, the impact of trap music in particular has catapulted a swath of new artists into the forefront. Lil Baby, Roddy Ricch, 21 Savage, Cardi B, and Megan Thee Stallion are some of the most visible, to name a few. Music listeners often question how these newcomers hold up against their predecessors, which begs the question, has popular rap music stagnated? Has it regressed? In this